Redrup Radial, it says on the badge, and that's not an easy thing to say, but this is a really unusual bike. Never seen one of these before, and I bet you haven't, because there's only one. It's got a radial engine, one cylinder there, one over here, and one at the front, and the crankshaft runs vertically, then connected by a bevel drive to the gearbox on the other side. Very unusual, only 250cc, and the only one made 50 years ago as a bit of a one-off by an aircraft engineer who was used to designing radial engines for airplanes. And so this is it, the one-off, and it's now in the Sammy Miller Museum. Now, if you thought BMW were the inventor of flat twins, think again. See this? Mid-30s Douglas. They had flat twins. This one, side valve, 600cc, very neat bike. And look at this, it's even got shaft drive, just like BMWs. This one here, by the 50s, they changed things somewhat. They got what looks like a telescopic fork. It's not quite. There's a linkage down at the bottom that you can see there. Pivots on this point, just swings up and down like that. In the bottom there, there's a plunger in oil to give you hydraulic damping, and then a spring all the way up that fork leg. But not only that, it's now push-rod overhead valve, not shaft drive or chain, but look at this. Don't know whether you can see it too well, if we can get a zoom in. Swinging arm there, very modern in the early 50s, but there's no spring there. Ignore the spring on the seat, but there's no suspension spring. That's because along here, these frame rails aren't truly frame rails, because there's actually a torsion bar in there, and a torsion bar actually twists along its length. So it's anchored there, pivots at the end, linkage under here. As the wheel goes up and down, you twist that bar. A nice springy action, very much like Morris Minor front suspension, if you know Morris Minors. This one's a little racer that they race in vintage events. And look at this one, goes right back to 1915. Flat twin, as you can see, air-cooled, but this time in line with the frame, but that is a long way back. Totally unrestored, this one. Little oil pump on here to keep the oil pressure up. Really looks quite strange. Coming back a bit later, 1956. Unfortunately, Douglas went out of production not far after this one, but they've changed it a lot. Very streamlined look. See those front forks there? They were called Earl's forks. Very, very strong. Separate shock absorber there, and a swinging arm on the front. Gave you very rigid steering, but you still had plenty of suspension travel. This one was a 500, overhead valve, flat twin. And again, 1950s, swing arm rear. Quite a nice looking bike, pretty popular in its day, but not popular enough. Now in 1938, a certain George Brough had a dream, and this is it. He made these in 1939, only about 4 of them. And the interesting thing with this is, it's a flat 4, 996cc, but a flat 4 different to a Gold Wing, for instance. 2 cylinders, one above the other, 2 cylinders, one above the other side, and it's air-cooled, not water-cooled, as a modern-day Wing is. It's also got plunger rear suspension here, and a shaft drive. Now in its time, and remember this was 1939, this was £185, which sounds cheap. But when you think an ordinary run-of-the-mill, say a 250, 350 bike, it only cost you around £40, or a top sports bike about £75, this was very, very expensive. Now you may have noticed recently that Paul and Wayne had a liking for a certain Hayabusa trike. Or what about this one? Something completely different here. Formula 3 car front end. Look at this seat, nicely upholstered. Big V-twin jack motor, 1000cc, and even a little seat for Wayne at the back. I think they'll be after this next.